Hello world, this is Edward Bevilacqua here in Las Vegas. Once again, one of the 7 great cities in the world. And today is Thursday, December 20th, 2018. I see blue sky out there, and I think it's kind of warm. I think we might be having record warmth in the 60s today. So a couple good things yesterday at Florence McClure Women's Correctional Center. Had a good meeting. It looks like we will be starting class there in February, early February, 1 month after starting at Southern Desert. Also yesterday, the organization that is headquartered out of Ireland, the country of Ireland, called Educate Magis, which is the network of Jesuit schools around the world, accepted us as a member of their network of Jesuit schools. So I think that's really a big thing to consider and celebrate. Soon we'll be on their map as the only Jesuit school, in quote, rock and roll quotes, in the state of Nevada. And that's good. And a lot of that we owe to our spiritual advisor, Father Max Oliva, SJ, who's also a graduate of Santa Clara a few years before me. And he is got his MBA from UC Berkeley as well. So he is the one Jesuit in the state of Nevada, also known as the best Jesuit in the state of Nevada. And as he might say, and also the worst Jesuit in the state of Nevada. So 2 good things happened yesterday. We received our charging station cart for Southern Desert. We received the mouse, the portable PCs, currently Chromebooks, will be arriving today or tomorrow. So all systems are go. And now we just need to continue to execute as we do every day. But our purpose on this live YouTube broadcast, worldwide broadcast, is to summarize this week's lesson plan, which is outside our skull-sized kingdom. Last week it was inside our skull-sized kingdom. The week before that was our introduction and orientation. And so what we got from last week is the answer to the questions of who am I and why do I behave the way I do. And it's not a spiritual thing, it's what is it going on in our brain when we're looking at it with an fMRI machine or a SPECT machine or other technology, what's actually happening in our brain in terms of how does our brain work, neurotransmitters, the reticular activation system. And we do that so we know how to be able to dial in who we need to be right now, and 5 minutes from now, 10 minutes from now. And a byproduct of that is if I know who I am and why I behave the way I do, then I know how your brain works, how other people's brain works. And since I need people to help me become successful, that's a valuable tool that I have at my disposal. I just have to learn how to use it properly. And that's kind of week number 3 is how do I use this tool? So that's outside our skull-sized kingdom. And we had TED Talks from David Logan, who's in contact with the school, Seth Godin, who's in contact with the school, Simon Sinek, who had his people contact us with his YU training program a couple years ago, a year and a half ago. And David Phillips is today. And the question is, how do we get other people to do what we want? How do we have power? So what we learned from David Logan is even though everybody's view of the world is I am the center of the universe, each of us are the center of our own universe, which is true. If you step back and watch what people do, they actually form tribes. And so we learned from David Logan, if you want to be successful, one way to do it is to join a tribe and nudge it forward. An alternative would be to start your own tribe. We're not focusing on starting your own tribe. Our focus for this week is join a tribe, nudge it forward. And by definition, nudging means getting other people to do what you want. So that means you have power. Power is our pathway to success. Success is having money plus meaning and purpose. Money, for our purposes, just means the ability to experience more. Meaning and purpose is service to others. That requires a sacrifice, and the easiest sacrifice everyone can make is to sacrifice their time with no expectation of return. Now, I know I said that fast, but that should be a review for everyone, not new information for people who don't know what we're doing. So David Logan, join a tribe, nudge it forward. Okay, cool, great. And the logical question from that should be, well, how do I nudge it forward? And that's the introduction to Seth Godin, who gives us a 4-step process on how do you nudge a tribe forward. Step number 1 is what? Step number 1, find something to change. And so by definition, if you don't have anything to change, if you join a tribe and there's nothing to change, you can't really nudge it forward. You're not really going to have power. So you got to find something to change. You can do that, find something to change. You can find something by observation, by asking questions, doing a little bit of research. That's how you can find something to change. Let me just do this so I can include the Carnegie Mellon, Scotty mascot. Step number 2, tell a story. Step number 3, connect the true believers. So your story will have 3 components, which is our elegant equation on getting people to do what you want. So you have to bond, add value, and ask. And at the end of the story, when you ask, the ask should be something sort of like, who's with me? Who's with me? Kind of a Jerry Maguire type of thing. Who's with me? And the people who believe what you believe are going to step forward and say, I'm with you. I'm with you. Let me do this so I can get in the picture a little bit more. So the people who are with you are going to step forward. It's going to be very easy if you tell a good story. And then they're going to say, what do we do now? And that's where you lead them. So step 1, find something to change. Step 2, tell a story. 3, connect the true believers. And the continuation of that is ignore the non-true believers. Don't argue with them. Don't try to persuade them otherwise. Just find the people and connect with the people who believe what you believe. Don't try to persuade people to believe what you believe. Just find the people who believe what you believe. And step 4 then is lead them. Okay, so if we say, cool, okay, now I have a 4-step formula to do it. And if I look at the 4-step formula and I ask the question, what's the difficult part? Not really hard to find something to change. Not really hard at all to connect the true believers, because they're going to come forward and say, we're with you. We don't deal in this week with leadership. That's generally week number 4 is, now that you're driving the car, now that you have passengers in your car, how do you drive it so that you're not going to crash and kill everyone, figuratively speaking. Maybe literally, but how do you do that? So the 3 questions, or the 3 parts of the formula: find something, change, tell a story, connect the true believers. The hard part is telling a story, because if you don't tell a good story, you're not going to be connecting anyone. And that's where Seth Godin leaves off. But that's the continuation to the next day, which was yesterday, day 3, is how do you tell a story that's compelling? And that's where Simon Sinek comes in with his, I think, the number 3 most popular TED Talk of all time. And it's basically start with why. Because people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And he has examples of Microsoft or Apple in there, and a lot of good examples. And if you watch it, he repeats many times, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So that means the story, thus, should be about why. Why what? Why we need to change the status quo. So if you think about it for a few seconds, I think it becomes pretty clear that if you can tell a story that tells people why we should change the status quo, or why the status quo should be changed, if you tell people that story and ask them if they're with you, that's one way to connect the true believers. So the story is about why. Why do we need to change the status quo? Not what do we do, not how are we going to do it. Those 2 questions get answered once you've connected the people And they're naturally going to ask, okay, what do you want us to do? How do we do it? The story, though, the way to connect the true believers is to find the people who believe what you believe, and you have to talk about why you need to change the status quo. Not really that hard. And that's a thing, if you think it through, just very formulaic, success will follow. Okay, so then day 4, today. Today is kind of a hack on that, which is David Phillips talking about adding a story before the story about why the status quo needs to be changed. We've seen this many times. Simon Sinek does it a lot, where before his talk, he talks about people in the military. Johnny Bravo, Captain William, I don't remember who it was, with the GoPro helicopter incident where he ended up getting a Congressional Medal of Honor. Blaine Elkers, Waiteba, people that talk about something before they talk about their talk. That's David Phillips' thing. Tell a story. And he calls it functional storytelling. And there are some parts to that. Number 1 is you have to believe everybody's a good storyteller. If you tell yourself you're not a good storyteller, and if you believe that, what's going to happen? Well, our reticular activation system is going to scan all information available to us to look for information to support our beliefs that we're not a good storyteller. So we're going to remember the times we told a story that nobody seemed to respond to the way we wanted. So David Phillips' number 1 point is everybody's a good storyteller. 2, write your stories down. So think about your stories and then actually write them down. And one reason for that is we have more stories than we know. Number 3, step 3, is to categorize your stories. And here, what we mean by that, what he means by that is you have this story, and these are the neurotransmitters that are released in that story. So if you want people to feel sad, if you want people to bond with you, the first step of our elegant equation, if you want people to bond with you, and it's a sad, the message is sad, you want to release cortisol or oxytocin, or the combination of both of those as a cocktail. David Phillips says you tell a story that does that. And then when you get into the story of why you need to change the status quo, people are already bonded with you. So get people to bond with you with the story before the story. So with Blaine Elkers, his TED Talk about Waiteba, he initially starts out talking about his wife says it's time. It's time to go to the hospital. So what does that do? In everybody's brain that's had a kid, they think back to that moment where their wife said it's time. The kid is going to be born. We need to go to the hospital. And then he goes into another bonding incident, which is his wife says, run the red light. Their first Bonnie and Clyde moment. Again, that'll trigger a memory, part of lived past in your brain or an imagination of what that would be like. Then he goes on to a third one, which is, I never thought I loved my wife so much as experiencing her go through 7 hours of hard labor. Again, anybody who's had that experience will remember it, bonding. Then the kid is born, high point, high moment. And he talks about calling his dad his go-to guy. He gives a description about that. Again, anybody who's experienced that is going to be thinking about that, bonding. And then he says, then the next day, he got a call from his stepmother. His dad died the night before. And so that's kind of crashing down. So Blaine Elkers covers many bases on the David Phillips bonding, telling a story before the story. These things had nothing to do with Waiteba. Those 5 or 6 bonding episodes had nothing whatsoever to do with the TED Talk, but it got people predisposed and ready and softened up to bond, so that when he went to the next step, which is adding value, they already were predisposed to like him and were interested and believed he could add value, which he absolutely did. And just continuing that thread, Blaine Elkers also did a very good job. The third part, which is asking people to use Waiteba and to put it on their lock screens on their phones. So So today, back to Phillips, today the idea is to tell a story before you tell the story. And you could intermingle stories. President Lincoln was very good at this. Many, many stories that President Lincoln would start by talking about something before talking about what the people wanted to talk about. And in the movie Lincoln, with Daniel Day-Lewis, it starts out with a scene at a train depot where some soldiers come up and they start chatting with them and they want to talk about important things. And he starts talking about him getting his haircut and his barber and et cetera, et cetera. Again, bonding, very important. So that's David Phillips. So the summary of this week is one way to get people to do what you want is to join a tribe and nudge it forward by telling a story that starts with why the status quo needs to be changed. If you do a good job doing that, bonding with people, adding value, and asking them to do something, if you do a good job at that and you ask them to, who's with me, you're going to get some followers, some true believers, and they're going to ask you what to do. And once you have your first followers, per Derek Sivers, you now are no longer a lone nut, but you are a leader. And that's it for this week. So thank you, world, for being there. Thank you to the students in Reno, in Las Vegas, at Casa Grande, the soon-to-be students at Southern Desert, and then at Florence McClure, and to the Jesuits around the world and Jesuit educators.